Next up is a very super interesting topic. We keep talking about open source development, but open source software, it's one thing. Open source hardware, whoa, that's something completely different and very hard to achieve. This is the topic of the next speech, titled, "Don't Trust, Verify, Hardware Included." Please welcome my Sicilian friend, John Sirianni.
Hello, everybody. Okay, is this, I'll stand here. Is this good? Okay. Adjust the mic. Are you ready? All right, let's begin. Wow. Good afternoon. I'm John Sirianni, Chief Executive of Tropic Square. Tropic Square was born out of Satoshi Labs in 2020 here in Prague with a very specific mission to provide secure semiconductor chips for the next generation of Bitcoin ecosystem and hardware wallets. Many of you here today are involved in the development of open source platforms for either Bitcoin or the blockchain economy. Have you ever thought about the security of the underlying hardware that supports the software? Well, we have. I've been in the semiconductor and cybersecurity business now for quite a long time, and I can tell you that the security of the underlying hardware really does matter. At Tropic Square, we've made a lot of progress in the last few years. So I'd like to share with you today briefly is the genesis story of Tropic Square, where it began and why, our progress to date, and how we intend to protect the hardware that is being used in the next generation of hardware wallets and the blockchain economy. And it works. All right. So the story begins roughly in, well, that's helpful. The story begins basically in 2012 when Slush and Stick were developing the early prototypes of the Trezor wallet, the wallet you know today as Trezor. I think we can all agree that developing a new electronic product from scratch is a monumental undertaking. We would also all agree that a hardware wallet is very specific. What we're looking for in a hardware wallet is to securely create, store, and manage private keys, and to provide freedom of control from outside influences, provide the freedom to transact, both to produce and protect individual sovereignty, and to be secure from attacks, either online or physical attacks. And most importantly, there should be no backdoors. And the inventors of the Trezor wallet were adamant that there should never be any backdoors. Today, the Trezor device is the most secure device on the market. Over the last 12 or so years, rigorous testing, adherence to the open source philosophy, frequent firmware updates, has produced the most secure device available to market, and essentially leads the evolution of security in the hardware wallet space. So any cryptographic handling device needs to be secure in its applications and software and user interfaces, obviously. But the secure software requires secure hardware, and that's what we're going to talk about next. During the development process, quite a few things were learned regarding the availability of chips in the industry at that time, and then also over the last 12 years. The first thing that was learned is that secure elements, which are an essential piece of providing the level of security that are needed for devices that manage cryptography, keys, and private data, secure elements were hackable. They're supposed to be secure, but our team was able to hack those devices with no special equipment. This could lead to, an implication could be that keys could be stolen. And so the lesson learned here was do not trust, but verify. Let's see, the forming's a little off. The next thing that was discovered was that as they went out to take a look at secure elements and chips that were stamped certified by one governing body or another, they realized that those were not as secure as they needed either. What was happening was in each form of certification, they were certified for the types of attacks that were known at that time. And so they couldn't trust certified secure elements and realized that they had to do their own independent testing, that would be mandatory at every stage of development and with every new vendor they selected. And the third item that was learned was that proprietary semiconductor intellectual property, semiconductor companies that have closed IP, which is most of them, aren't able to share the features, what's under the hood, why it works, how it works, documentation. Due to very strong and rigorous non-disclosure agreements, that cannot be shared. All right, that's the business model. Can't argue with that. But what it meant was that when the community discovered that there were problems, the community could not share that information due to the rigorous non-disclosure agreements signed with the chip companies. So the realization there is that closed meant risky. It also meant that the industry was not innovating quick enough. So this was led to a very unhappy case. I guess our formatting's out a little bit. Huh, okay, we'll make do. So the semiconductor industry needed to level up. This was clear. So imagine you're in that situation. You can't provide the type of solution that you'd like to provide. What do? Well, in the case of this development team, they came up with some very clever firmware techniques to keep the data secure and searched for more secure devices. At the end of the day, they came to the only logical conclusion that they could come to, which is to start their own semiconductor company. And that's what they did. So Tropic Square was born to develop truly open integrated chips. The philosophy is as open source as possible, as transparent as possible, meaning that what's in the device will be shared with the community, and that makes it as audible as possible, the ability to audit what is in the device. So you as a developer of a, we're going to go back one. Okay, let's stay there. I guess we've got a problem with the monitor here. So the principles on which the device is developed are based on some very, very well-known cryptographic principles and security principles in both device development and also IT development. As we mentioned, open source community, software, firmware, and now hardware. And we'll touch on that in just a moment, that there is a growing open hardware movement and has been for the last few years. The key security principles are, Gustav Kerckhoffs was a Dutch cryptographer in the 18th century, in the 1800s, and he postulated that a crypto system needs to be secure, even if everything about the crypto system is known, except the keys. Claude Shannon then inverted that and said, assume that the attacker knows everything about your system the moment you make it. And therefore, you have to protect the keys and use the best available cryptography. So that is our principle, and that's why we can have an open system where the architecture is shared, the source code is shared, and it can still be secure. Well, that mandates you must have very good cryptography, and you must protect that cryptography from being influenced, which leads us to the next bullet. Best available cryptography is in the system. And there's a third item. In the IT enterprise security environment, over the last 5 or 6 years, zero trust is a concept that has been very commonly talked about, and many companies are trying to deploy that. What we've done is brought zero trust from that thinking down into the chip. So if you think of a chip as a house with many rooms, we've brought zero trust down between the rooms inside the chip. What that does is it secures the user's data at the silicon and atomic level. We'll talk about that more. And we've involved the community for third-party and open community testing, and we'll continue to do more of that as the product is launched. We believe in security through transparency, not security through obscurity. And we believe we have future-proofed the device to be relevant for many, many years to come. In this picture are a rack of samples. This is the chip called Tropic 1. It is a crypto-crow processor. The package measures 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters. This is the chip. The actual chip, I think, is about 2 by 3 millimeters, maybe a little less. The dark patches represent the crypto-hardened circuits. So this is where a lot of cryptography is happening. You can't scan it. You can't measure it. You can't use laser scanning. There are many features in here that protect the space. So let's get into what's under the hood. Expanded view of the chip. It is a security element. It is considered a cryptographic coprocessor, which means that all of the cryptography, the handling of the keys, is taken away from the MCU or the CPU and done in this chip. It is a RISC-V architecture. RISC-V is the open hardware architecture that has been growing steadily over the last few years and is, quite frankly, taking over at the edge. So device developers are now moving very quickly to the RISC-V architecture. The data path processing in the silicon that processes the user's data is hard encrypted. We've got an alphabet soup of the best cryptography that's optimized for chip-level security, and memory access is authenticated. Now, on the left of the slide are the truly open pieces of intellectual property that someday in the near future you'll find out on GitHub and other communities. On the right are the pieces of intellectual property we still needed to license from some of the leading experts in security in the industry. Over time, more and more of those functions on the right-hand side will move over to the left-hand side and become truly open. So this is based on the architectural decisions that were made in this last year. We've got a lot of it that is open. Some of it still is not at this point. More to come. So what's closed and what's interesting about what's closed? For those of you not involved in this industry, a puff is not the magic dragon. It's a physically unclonable function. And basically what that's doing is it's taking advantage of the variability in each chip at the atomic and subatomic level to fingerprint that chip. So we tie the behavior of that chip, which is absolutely unique, to how the cryptography is managed within that chip. Therefore, you can't clone any of the functions within the chip. One-time programmable flash memory, and we have physical attack detectors and active mitigation strategies for laser scanning, electromagnetic scanning, voltage glicking, micro probing, and active shield. More technical probably than you care about at this point, but we do have a booth, and so we invite you to come over to the booth to look at the details in greater granularity. So if you're a system designer and you're developing a device that needs to be very trustworthy, you want to see the source code. You also want to do the verification and validation yourself. And so as a system-level designer, you're going to be interested in these basic functions of the chip. It offloads the key handling, secure storage, secure data storage of both keys and any data, unique silicon-based fingerprinting, system root of trust, digital identity, and digital authentication. So cool. All right, hardware wallet, exciting. But did we make it just for that? No. I've been in critical infrastructure most of my career, developing products, leading companies, startups, and larger companies. And so, as I've seen various technologies move from the lab into the marketplace, I can tell you that the trend that we're seeing today for critical infrastructure is the trend to move to a crypto-secure infrastructure. It's not a speculation. We see it happening. So connecting the dots, the big trends, that the blockchain itself has become a fault-tolerant global compute system. Undeniable. It's moving in that direction. Consensus protocol ecosystems depend on an immutable ID, not arguable. Also, authentication, attestation, transparency, and the ability to audit what's in the system and what's changing in the system. These are not negotiable. It's happening. Increasingly, as industry moves from Industry 4.0 to Industry 5.0, the governance mandates are trickling down into cybersecurity mandates for producers of devices to have full transparency and auditability. They don't know how to do it right now, but we know how to do it. Critical infrastructure is evolving to leverage blockchain architectures. This is happening. You can see it happening in a number of different industries. And so what we foresee is that the crypto-critical infrastructure growth over this next decade are, as you would expect, data storage devices such as the wallets, tablets, and servers, and across personal, commercial, and government IT systems, fintech and devices and networks, operational technology, as I hinted to. A lot of companies are trying to protect supply chains now, and telecom networks by developing blockchain nannies that sit over the top of it and certify and attest to the calculations that are done off blockchain. So we see that going on. The most exciting application, I believe, is the AI edge. For those of you that aren't watching what's going on, IoT turned into instead of the Internet of Things, has now turned into the Internet of AI things at the edge. And so as we see more autonomous devices at the edge, drones, robotics, home devices, we will see the need for better security down to the fingerprinting level of the chip to be in those edge devices. You do not want your home robot to suddenly start behaving in a bad way. M2M payment systems. In the early days, it was called telemetry, then it was called machine-to-machine, and then it was called IoT, and now we're back to machine-to-machine. Today, you and I can transact with one form of cryptocurrency or another. In the short future, we're going to see devices, machines, robots negotiating amongst themselves contracts and then deciding how to transact value back and forth. So machine-to-machine payments, that's coming out of the lab now as part of the Web3 movement. So this is the big picture we see beyond the wallets, which is one reason why I'm very excited to be in this position and leading a very, very passionate team here in Prague. So last slide, secure hardware. It's time to boot up. Visit us at the Satoshi Labs booth right here in the back. We have a microscope set up. You can take a look at the chip yourself. There are demonstrations, and have a good technical conversation with our CTO and the rest of the technical team. Thank you for your time. Enjoy it. Cheers.